My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 29 years old, and I still remember perfectly the sound of silence that filled the meeting room when my boss, Michael Henderson, raised his voice to say, "Everyone here has contributed to this quarter's success, except someone who evidently doesn't understand how numbers work." His words echoed through the room like a hammer blow. 18 colleagues turned toward me, some with embarrassed expressions, others with poorly concealed curiosity. I felt heat rising from my neck to my cheeks as Michael continued talking about our $2.3 billion portfolio as if I hadn't spent the last 6 months building every single predictive model that had made that performance possible. I sat motionless, hands folded in my lap, while he continued his presentation. Inside me, something broke. Not anger, something colder and more determined. Something that had been waiting too long to emerge. But before I tell you what happened next, let me go back and explain how I got to that moment. Because this isn't just my story. It's the story of every woman who has ever seen her work attributed to someone else. Of every professional who has ever felt their competence minimized. Of every person who has ever struggled to be recognized in a world that prefers not to see them. 4 years ago, when I graduated from Wharton School with a specialization in quantitative finance, I had big dreams and realistic expectations. I knew Wall Street wouldn't be easy for an Asian American woman, but I was prepared. I had the best grades in my class, 3 prestigious internships, and letters of recommendation that opened the doors to Sterling & Associates, one of Manhattan's most respected investment boutiques. On my first day, I wore a black suit I had bought with my college savings. As I walked through the floors lined with marble and glass, with panoramic views of Central Park, I felt like I was finally in the right place. This was my chance to prove that all those years of studying, all those sleepless nights over econometrics books, had meaning. Michael Henderson welcomed me with a professional smile and a firm handshake. At 45, he was the director of the Quantitative Analysis Department, a man who had built his reputation on emerging markets in the 90s. He had that kind of confidence that comes from experience, but also something more subtle, a certain condescension that I mistook for authority at the time. "Sarah," he told me that first morning, "we work with the country's best clients here. They manage fortunes worth hundreds of millions. There's no room for improvisation or, how should I put it, the inexperience typical of new graduates." I nodded enthusiastically. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Henderson. I'm here to learn and contribute." "Good," he smiled. "You'll start with historical data analysis. Nothing too complex, but essential to understand how things work here." What I didn't understand right away was that nothing too complex meant he was assigning me work that no one else wanted to do. While my male colleagues, hired the same week, immediately started working on client pitches, I spent my days cleaning datasets and creating reports that ended up in archives. But I didn't complain. I worked. I arrived at 6 a.m. when the office was still empty, and Manhattan's lights filtered through the windows, creating long shadows on the polished floors. I stayed late. When traffic noise diminished and only I remained, with my spreadsheets and the silent hum of computers processing data. In those first months, while systematizing years of market data, I began to notice patterns, correlations that no one had ever highlighted, anomalies in returns that suggested hidden opportunities, discrepancies in valuation models being used for similar assets. One evening, after finishing my assigned work, I created a predictive model for the technology sector. I used machine learning algorithms I had studied at university, combining them with traditional technical analysis. The model identified undervalued stocks with 73% accuracy in retrospective tests. The next morning, I left the report on Michael's desk with a note. "I noticed some interesting opportunities in the tech sector. I think it could be useful for the Meridian portfolio." 2 days later, Michael presented his analysis of the technology sector to the Meridian client. He used exactly my model, my predictions, even some of my exact formulations. The client was so impressed that they increased their investment by $50 million. When Michael returned from the meeting, he called me into his office. "Sarah, I noticed you did some extra research on the tech sector. It's interesting, but in the future, focus on the tasks I assign you. We don't want to confuse clients with too many different voices." "Of course, Mr. Henderson," I replied, though inside me, something was beginning to harden. In the following months, the pattern strengthened. I researched, analyzed, and created. Michael presented, gained recognition, and collected bonuses. My male colleagues were gradually involved in increasingly important projects, while I remained the data girl, as they began calling me with a condescension they masked as affection. The turning point came with the Harrison Industries project. Harrison was an industrial conglomerate considering an $800 million restructuring. It was the type of operation that could make an analyst's career, or destroy it if it went wrong. Michael assigned me the preliminary research. "You've proven you're good with numbers," he said. "Prepare me a complete analysis of their last 10 years of performance, nothing more." But I didn't stop at nothing more. I spent 3 weeks deconstructing every aspect of Harrison's business. I analyzed their cash flows, debt structure, operational efficiency, competitive position. I created projections for 5 different scenarios, each with its own risk variables. What I discovered left me breathless. Harrison didn't just need restructuring. It needed complete transformation. Their main assets were overvalued by 40%. Their debts were structured to create an insolvency spiral within 18 months. But hidden in all this was an incredible opportunity. If Harrison had sold 2 of its underperforming divisions and invested the proceeds in modernizing their logistics division, they could have tripled the company's value in 3 years. My model showed this strategy had an 89% probability of success, with a potential 340% return for investors. I compiled a 47-page report that wasn't just an analysis, but a complete roadmap for Harrison Industries' transformation. I included interactive charts, Monte Carlo simulations, and a detailed implementation plan. Michael received the report on a Friday evening. Monday morning, he called me into his office with a serious expression. "Sarah," he said, "this work on Harrison it's exceptional. I've never seen such detailed analysis from a junior analyst." My heart swelled with pride. Finally, the recognition I was waiting for. "However," he continued, "the client expects me to present the analysis. You understand this is a department project, not individual work, right?" My joy extinguished like a candle in the wind. "Of course, Mr. Henderson. But perhaps I could participate in the presentation, to answer any technical questions." "That won't be necessary," he smiled. "I know the material well enough to handle any questions." But excellent work. Really. The following week, Michael presented Harrison's restructuring strategy to our company's board, and subsequently to the client. He used every one of my recommendations, every one of my charts, every one of my projections. The operation was a resounding success. Harrison implemented exactly the strategy I had designed, and within 6 months, the value of their shares had increased by 180%. Michael received a promotion and a $500,000 bonus. I received a positive review and a 3% raise. But something had changed in me. That night, sitting in my small Brooklyn apartment, looking at Manhattan's lights from my window, I made a decision. I would no longer allow my work to be invisibly absorbed by someone else. It was time to start documenting everything. I started discreetly. Every email I sent, every report I created, every analysis I conducted was saved in a personal backup system. I began using timestamps on all my documents and sending copies of my work to my personal email address for security. But the real breakthrough came when I started building direct relationships with clients. It wasn't something I had planned. It happened naturally. The first was James Morrison, CFO of Morrison Holdings. During a conference call, Michael was presenting one of my analyses on emerging markets when Morrison asked a very specific question about foreign exchange risk calculation methodology. Michael stammered for a few seconds before saying, "Let me have Sarah answer. She's the one who..." Supervised that part of the analysis. I responded with precision and confidence, explaining not only the methodology, but also why I had chosen that particular approach over available alternatives. Morrison was impressed. "Sarah," he said at the end of the call, "could you send me the technical details of that model? I'd like to share them with my analysis team." After the call, Michael looked at me with a strange expression. "In the future, let me answer client questions. It's important they see consistent leadership." But it was too late. Morrison had my direct email address, and over the following weeks, he began contacting me directly for technical questions. Not to bypass Michael, but because he knew I had the answers he was looking for. The pattern repeated with other clients. Lisa Park from Park Capital, David Kumar from Kumar & Associates, Maria Rodriguez from Rodriguez Family Trust. All began seeing me as the actual source of technical expertise that Michael presented, and I began cultivating these relationships, not in a sneaky or dishonest way, but simply by being available, prepared, and genuinely interested in their needs. When Morrison called at 9 p.m. worried about European market volatility, I answered. When Lisa Park needed a quick assessment of an investment opportunity, I prepared it within 24 hours. What the clients didn't know was that Michael received all the credit for my availability and competence. My nighttime responses became Michael's team's dedication. My express analyses became the Henderson department's response speed, but I documented everything. Every email, every call, every recommendation. I was silently building a portfolio of evidence showing who was really serving our most important clients. The event that changed everything happened during what should have been my moment of glory. After 3 years of invisible work, I had finally been assigned my first direct client presentation. It was a smaller account, Westfield Investments, but it was still my chance to prove I could do more than prepare analyses for others. I worked for weeks on the presentation. Westfield was considering an investment in the renewable energy sector, an area I had studied intensively in my personal projects. I created a comprehensive analysis showing how solar energy was reaching parity with fossil fuels in 23 American states. My presentation included original projections on production costs, analysis of government subsidies, and specific recommendations on 12 undervalued companies in the sector. It was the best work I had ever done. The morning of the presentation, I arrived at the office at 6 to review the final slides. At 7:30, Michael called me into his office. "Sarah," he said, "I have news about the Westfield presentation." "Yes?" My heart began beating faster. "I've decided to handle it personally. Westfield is an important client, and I think it's better if they see a senior face." I felt the world stop around me. "But, Mr. Henderson, I worked on this project for weeks. I know every detail of the analysis. And you did excellent work," he smiled. "That's why I'm confident I can present it effectively. You can come for technical support, naturally." "Technical support," I repeated, my voice trembling slightly. "Exactly. You might need to answer some questions about details, but let me handle the main presentation." What happened during the presentation was worse than I had imagined. Michael not only presented my work as his own, but also made several errors in interpreting the data. When the client asked specific questions, Michael looked at me, expecting me to intervene, but presenting my answers as if they were supplementary explanations to his analyses. The worst came when John Westfield, the company's founder, commented, "Michael, this renewable energy analysis is brilliant. It's exactly the kind of innovative insight we were looking for." Michael smiled and replied, "Thank you, John. I spent a lot of time developing this methodology. I believe it's the most accurate approach to evaluate this sector." The methodology that had required 3 months of research. The methodology I had developed working late into the night. The methodology Michael had seen for the first time that very morning. Westfield signed a $50 million contract that day. Michael received a $200,000 commission. I received a "thanks for the support" and a mention in the company's internal newsletter as team member who contributed to Westfield's success. But the real humiliation was yet to come. 3 months after the Westfield success, came the quarterly meeting that would change my life. It was one of those meetings Sterling and Associates organized every quarter to celebrate successes and discuss future strategies. The entire department was present, plus some senior executives and company partners. Michael had prepared a presentation on his successes of the last 3 months. Harrison Industries, Morrison Holdings, Westfield Investments, every client I had served, every analysis I had created, every strategy I had developed was presented as the result of Michael's visionary leadership. I sat in the front row, watching my own slides projected on the screen, while Michael received applause for innovations I had developed during my weekends. Next to me, my junior colleagues took notes, probably impressed by Michael's competence. Then came the moment that broke me. Naturally, Michael said, not everyone on our team has contributed equally to these successes. Some team members still seem to have difficulty understanding the complexity of high-level financial analysis. He stopped and looked directly at me. Sarah, for example, has shown a certain reluctance to adapt to our department's standards. Perhaps she'd be better suited to an administrative support role. The silence that followed was deafening. 18 people turned toward me, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Michael continued. Don't misunderstand me. Sarah is diligent. But financial analysis requires a type of strategic thinking that, well, not everyone possesses naturally. Strategic thinking. The words echoed in my mind as I remembered all the nights I had spent developing strategies that had earned millions for our company. All the times I had saved Michael's projects with my analyses. All the clients who called me directly because they knew I had the answers. I remained seated, maintaining a professional smile, while Michael continued his presentation. But inside me, something definitive was crystallizing. It wasn't anger, it was pure determination. When the meeting ended, I returned to my desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a blue folder I had prepared 6 months earlier, hoping I would never have to use it. It contained everything. Emails from clients thanking me personally, documents showing the chronology of my analyses, proof of every single project I had actually completed. But the most important part of the folder was an Excel file I had kept meticulously updated. It showed every client who contacted me directly, every project I managed behind the scenes, every dollar of revenue my analyses had generated. The numbers were clear. In the previous 18 months, 73% of Michael's department profits came from clients who considered me their primary contact. 89% of winning strategies had been developed by me. 100% of the compliments Michael received from clients were for work I had done. I took the folder and walked toward Margaret Sullivan's office, Sterling and Associates managing partner. Margaret Sullivan was 52 years old and had a legendary reputation on Wall Street. She had been one of the first women to become managing partner at a top-tier investment firm in the 90s, and had built Sterling and Associates from a small boutique to one of the sector's most respected companies. Her assistant told me she was busy, but I remained waiting. After 2 hours, Margaret opened her office door. Sarah, she said, surprised to see me, what can I do for you? I need to talk to you about a situation in Michael Henderson's department, I replied, holding the blue folder tight to my chest. Margaret looked at me carefully. After 30 years in business, she knew how to recognize when someone had reached their breaking point. Come in. Her office was a masterpiece of professional elegance. Leather armchairs, an antique desk, Harvard and Wharton diplomas on the walls. But what struck me most were the photos on the tables. Margaret with clients, Margaret receiving awards, Margaret shaking hands with important figures from the financial world. All images of a woman who had built her career on real competence and deserved recognition. Sit down, Margaret said, closing the door. What's happening? Mrs. Sullivan, I began. For the last 3 years, I have systematically documented the discrepancies between who actually does the work in our department and who receives recognition for that work. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Continue. I opened the folder and began showing the evidence. Emails from clients addressing me as their real analyst. projects I had completed entirely, but that had been presented as Michael's work. Analyses I had written word for word, but that Michael had presented as his innovations. This is the Harrison Industries project, I said, showing my original report dated 6 months before Michael's presentation. And this is the Westfield project. I showed my original research on renewable energy, complete with timestamps and progressive versions. Margaret examined each document with growing attention. Sarah, she said after 20 minutes, this is extremely detailed. How much time did you dedicate to compiling this documentation? 3 years, I replied. Every project, every client, every analysis. I have everything here. Margaret leaned back in her chair, studying me with a look I couldn't decipher. Why now? She asked. Why didn't you come to me before? Because I hoped things would change naturally, I admitted. I thought that if I continued doing good work, sooner or later I would be recognized. But today Michael publicly defined me as inadequate for financial analysis, using as proof of his success projects that I completed. And the clients? Margaret asked. What do they think of this situation? Many don't even know Michael exists, I said. They contact me directly for everything. Here's the list. I showed her my Excel file with client contacts. Margaret studied it with growing surprise. Sarah, she said slowly, this shows you directly control relationships with clients worth $1.8 billion. Yes, but officially, all these are Michael's clients. Margaret closed the folder and looked at me directly. What do you want me to do? The question caught me unprepared. I had been so focused on documenting the problem that I hadn't thought clearly about the solution. I want recognition for my work, I said finally. I want to be evaluated for my real competencies, not for someone else's perceptions, and I want clients to know who's really serving their needs. Margaret remained silent for a long moment. Sarah, what you're showing me is serious. If it's accurate, it represents a significant violation of trust and poor human resource management. It's all verifiable, I said. Every document, every email, every project. I believe you, Margaret said, but before proceeding, I need to ask an important question. Are you doing this to improve the situation, or for revenge? The question made me reflect. Both, I admitted. I want justice for what I've suffered, but I also want Sterling and Associates to be the type of company that recognizes real talent, regardless of gender or hierarchical position. Margaret smiled for the first time during our conversation. Honest answer. I like that. Give me a week to investigate. Meanwhile, continue working normally. Don't tell anyone about this conversation. And if Michael asks why I was here, tell him we were discussing your professional development, Margaret said. Technically, it wouldn't be false. The week that followed was surreal. I continued working normally, completing analyses I knew would be presented by Michael, responding to emails from clients who believed they were talking to Michael's assistant, preparing reports that would further build someone else's reputation. But I knew Margaret was investigating. I saw her talking discreetly with various colleagues. I noticed she was reviewing files from past projects. I observed she was having meetings with some of our most important clients. Wednesday of that week, I received a call from James Morrison of Morrison Holdings. He was agitated. Sarah, he said, I just had the strangest conversation with your managing partner. She asked me questions about who really manages our account. My heart began beating fast. What did you tell her? The truth, Morrison replied. That you're the person who knows our business. That you're the one who guided us through the restructuring last year. That you're the reason we remained Sterling and Associates clients. Mr. Morrison, Sarah, he interrupted me. I don't know what's happening there, but I hope you finally get the recognition you deserve. Because if Sterling and Associates doesn't appreciate you, there are many other firms that would. Similar conversations came from Lisa Park and David Kumar. All my main clients were telling Margaret the same thing. I was their real financial consultant, not Michael. Friday of that week, Margaret's assistant called me. Mrs. Sullivan would like to see you in her office at 5:30. When I arrived, Margaret wasn't alone. With her were Robert Sterling, the company's founder, and Patricia Wong, the human resources director. Sarah, Margaret said, sit down. We've completed our investigation. Robert Sterling, whom I had met only once in 3 years, addressed me directly. Sarah, what we've discovered is concerning. Not only for the specific situation you documented, but for what it suggests about our company's culture. Patricia Wong opened a folder. We interviewed 17 clients in the last 5 days. 16 of them identify you as their primary consultant. 11 didn't even know Michael Henderson existed. Furthermore, Margaret continued, we reviewed files from all projects over the last 3 years. The documentation you provided is 100% accurate. There hasn't been a single significant analysis in the Henderson department that wasn't created by you. Robert Sterling leaned forward. Sarah, this represents a systematic failure of our supervision. We allowed an unsustainable situation to continue for years, and we're sorry. What does this mean for me? I asked. It means, Margaret said, that we're completely restructuring the department. Effective immediately, you'll be promoted to senior financial analyst, with an 85% salary increase and an incentive package based on the clients you actually manage. My heart stopped. And, Michael Henderson will be transferred to the Business Development Department, Patricia Wong said. He'll have the opportunity to use his presentation skills to attract new clients, but he won't manage existing accounts anymore. However, Margaret added, there's something you need to know. Michael has requested an urgent meeting for tomorrow morning. I believe he suspects something is changing. Robert Sterling stood up. Sarah, tomorrow will be the final test. Michael will present his version of the facts. You'll have the opportunity to present yours. The board will make a definitive decision on how to proceed. I'll be ready, I said, though inside me anxiety was mounting. One important thing, Margaret added. Tomorrow won't just be a matter of facts. It will be a matter of leadership. We need to see if you're ready not just to document problems, but to lead solutions. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room. When I arrived, Michael was already there, with an expression of confidence I had never seen waver in 3 years. He had a thick folder and the air of someone convinced they had the ace up their sleeve. Present were Margaret Sullivan, Robert Sterling, Patricia Wong, and 2 other board members I had never met before. Margaret began. Michael, you requested this meeting. You're first to present. Michael stood up with his usual confidence. Thank you, Margaret. I've heard there have been misunderstandings regarding our department's management. I want to clarify some facts. He opened his folder. In the last 3 years, under my leadership, the department has increased profits by 340%. We've acquired clients worth a total of $2.3 billion. We've maintained a 97% retention rate. All accurate numbers. All results I had contributed to creating. Now, Michael continued, I understand Sarah may feel undervalued. She's a diligent worker and has contributed to data analysis. But there's a fundamental difference between data analysis and strategic management of client relationships. Michael paused for effect. Sarah is excellent with numbers, but clients need more than numbers. They need vision, leadership, someone who can guide them through complex decisions. That's what I provide. He showed his first slide, a timeline of his successes with clients. Harrison Industries, I personally developed the restructuring strategy that saved the company. Morrison Holdings, I created the diversification plan that tripled their profits. Westfield Investments, I identified opportunities in the renewable energy sector before they became mainstream. Every word was technically true, but completely misleading. He had developed strategies I had written. He had created plans I had researched and formulated. He had identified opportunities I had discovered through months of analysis. What Sarah doesn't understand, Michael continued, is that analysis is only the first step. Real value comes from the ability to synthesize that analysis into actionable strategies and communicate them effectively to clients. And frankly, these are skills that require years of experience and a certain type of executive presence. His gaze briefly rested on me. The message was clear. Sarah can do the calculations, but doesn't have the presence to guide multi-million-dollar clients. Finally, Michael concluded, I want to emphasize that every success story I've presented was built through teamwork. Sarah has contributed, certainly, but as part of a larger team guided by my strategic vision. He sat down with a confident smile. He had presented his case with the same competence he used with clients. He had been convincing, professional, and had transformed 3 years of credit theft into a story of collaborative leadership. Margaret turned to me. "Sarah, your response." I stood up, feeling the weight of the moment. Everything I had worked for, everything I had documented, everything I had endured came down to this moment. "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. Michael is right about one thing. Numbers are only the beginning. But let me show you where numbers end and reality begins." I opened my laptop and projected my first slide, a graph showing the contact patterns of our top 10 clients over the last 18 months. This graph shows who our clients actually contact when they need assistance. The blue line represents contacts with Michael. The red line represents contacts with me. The graph was devastating. For every single client, the red line completely dominated the blue line. In some cases, the blue line was almost invisible. "As you can see," I continued, "clients don't use Michael as their primary resource. They contact me directly for analysis, for advice, for decision support. Not because they were told to, but because they know I have the answers they need." I showed the next slide, a compilation of emails from clients. These are emails our clients sent me in the last 6 months. I'll read just a few excerpts. From James Morrison: "Sarah, your analysis on emerging markets saved our portfolio. I don't know what we'd do without your expertise." From Lisa Park: "Sarah, can you give me a quick assessment of the healthcare sector? I trust your judgment more than any other analyst we've worked with." From David Kumar: "Sarah, I need your opinion on this opportunity. Your previous recommendations have been spot on." The room was completely silent. I could see Margaret taking notes, Robert Sterling carefully studying the screens, Patricia Wong making mental calculations. "Now," I continued, "let me address the question of executive presence that Michael mentioned." I showed a slide with performance metrics. In the last 18 months, clients who contact me directly have a 100% retention rate. Clients who work primarily with Michael have a 78% retention rate. Clients who work with me generate, on average, 23% more revenue per account. This suggests that traditional executive presence might be less important than real competence and responsiveness to client needs. Michael shifted in his chair. I could see he was about to interrupt me, but Margaret gestured for him to remain seated. "However," I continued, "I'm not here to demonize Michael or to claim all the credit. I'm here to propose a model that works better for everyone." I showed my final slide, a proposed organizational chart. I propose we recognize everyone's real competencies and build on them. Michael is excellent at initial presentations and relationship building. I'm strong in technical analysis and ongoing client support. Instead of creating a false hierarchy, let's create a partnership model where everyone contributes what they do best. In this model, Michael would continue to be the face of the department for new business and major presentations. I would handle technical analysis and ongoing client relationship management. We would both receive appropriate credit for our contributions. This isn't about winning or losing. It's about creating a system that maximizes value for our clients and accurately recognizes everyone's contributions. I sat down, my heart beating fast. I had said everything I wanted to say. The room remained silent for what seemed like an eternity. Then Robert Sterling spoke. "Michael, what's your reaction to Sarah's proposal?" Michael seemed conflicted. On one hand, my proposal allowed him to maintain dignity and a significant role. On the other hand, it represented a diminishment of his absolute control. "It's interesting," he said slowly, "but I'm concerned about the confusion it might create with clients. They're used to a single point of contact." Actually, Margaret intervened. During our interviews with clients, many mentioned they would prefer to have direct access to Sarah for technical questions, while maintaining Michael for strategic discussions. Patricia Wong added, "From our conversations, it seems clients have already created this type of arrangement informally. Sarah's proposal would simply formalize it." Robert Sterling stood up. "We've heard both perspectives. The board will retire to deliberate. We'll let you know the decision by tomorrow." The night was sleepless. I spent hours mentally reviewing the presentation. wondering if I had said enough, if I had said too much, if I had found the right balance between assertiveness and collaboration. The next morning, Margaret called me at 9 o'clock. "Sarah, can you come to my office and bring Michael with you?" When we arrived, the atmosphere was formal but not tense. Margaret had a folder in front of her and a serious but not hostile expression. "We've made a decision," she began, "and I want to explain our reasoning. First, it's clear the current situation isn't sustainable. Clients need clarity about who serves them, and employees need appropriate recognition for their work. Second, you both have valuable but different skills. Michael, you have strong presentation skills and client relationship building abilities. Sarah, you have exceptional analytical skills and client confidence for technical matters. Third, Sarah's proposal for a partnership model has merit, but requires modifications." Margaret opened the folder. "Here's what we'll implement, effective immediately. Sarah, you'll be promoted to senior financial analyst with primary responsibility for technical analysis, client support, and ongoing relationship management. Your salary will increase by 90%, and you'll receive bonuses based on the performance of the clients you manage." My heart jumped. It was more than I had hoped for. "Michael, you'll maintain the director role, but your focus will be on new business development, major client presentations, and strategic planning. You'll continue to be the face of the department for external purposes. However," Margaret continued, "there will be complete transparency about individual contributions. Clients will know who does what, and internal recognition will reflect actual contributions. Additionally, we'll implement this model as a pilot program. If it works, we'll extend it to other departments." Michael seemed thoughtful. "And current clients will choose their preferred structure," Margaret said. "Some might prefer to continue primarily with Sarah, others might prefer the previous arrangement. The choice will be theirs." "Questions?" Margaret asked. "1," I said. "How do we manage the transition? Clients might be confused by the change." "Excellent question," Margaret replied. "We'll organize individual calls with every major client to explain the new structure. You'll both be present, and you can explain how this will improve the service they receive." Michael finally spoke. I can support this arrangement, but I want to make sure we maintain professional standards and client satisfaction." "Naturally," Margaret said. "The success of this arrangement will depend on your ability to work together professionally." She turned to both of us. "It's clear there had been tensions, but now you have the opportunity to build something better. Don't waste it." But the first days of the new structure were awkward. Michael and I had to learn to work together as peers instead of in a false hierarchy. But gradually, we found a rhythm. Clients reacted positively. James Morrison said, "Finally, now I can call Sarah directly for technical questions and Michael for strategic discussions. It's much more efficient." Lisa Park commented, "This is exactly what I was hoping for. Sarah knows my technical needs, and Michael can help me with the big picture." But the real test came with a new client, Thomson Industries, a manufacturing conglomerate considering a major acquisition. Michael handled the initial presentation, using his strong communication skills to explain our approach. I prepared the technical analysis, creating a comprehensive model to evaluate the acquisition target. During the client meeting, the dynamic was completely different from before. Michael presented the strategic overview, then turned to me. "Sarah has developed an innovative model to evaluate this type of transaction. Sarah, can you explain the methodology?" It was the first time in 3 years that Michael had given me public credit for my work. I explained the model, answered technical questions, and demonstrated how we could use it to optimize their acquisition strategy. The client was impressed. "This is exactly the type of combined expertise we were looking for," said Thomson's CEO. "Strategic vision and technical depth." Thomson signed a $150 million contract. For the first time, Michael and I received appropriate credit for our respective contributions. 6 months after implementing the new structure, the results spoke for themselves. Our department had increased profits by 45%. Client satisfaction was at an all-time high. Employee morale was dramatically improved, but more importantly, the culture was changing. Other departments began implementing similar structures. recognizing actual contributions instead of relying on traditional hierarchies. During the quarterly review, Margaret presented the results to the board. The partnership model Sarah proposed not only solved a specific problem, but revealed opportunities for improving performance across the organization, she said. Sarah, she turned to me, the board has authorized a new position, Director of Client Innovation. You'd be responsible for implementing similar structures across all departments. Are you interested? It was an incredible opportunity. Not only recognition for my work, but the chance to transform the entire organization's culture. Yes, I replied. Absolutely. 2 years after that fateful quarterly meeting, Sterling & Associates had become an industry leader in innovative workplace structures. We had implemented partnership models in every department, creating an environment where actual contributions were recognized and rewarded. Michael and I had developed a genuinely collaborative working relationship. We weren't friends, but we were effective partners. He had found his niche in strategic planning and client development, while I led technical innovation and client relationship management. But perhaps the most significant change was in myself. I had learned that documentation and persistence could overcome even the most entrenched inequalities. I had discovered that my voice, when supported by irrefutable facts, could change not only my situation, but the entire culture of an organization. On the day of my second anniversary as Director of Client Innovation, I received an email from a young analyst in the technology department. The subject line was, "I need help." The content was familiar, a talented woman whose work was consistently attributed to her male supervisor. She had documented everything, but didn't know how to proceed. I replied immediately, "Come to my office, let's talk." While waiting for her arrival, I looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline. 2 years ago, I was sitting in a cubicle, watching others receive credit for my work. Now I had a corner office and the power to help others in similar situations. When she knocked on my door, I recognized something in her eyes that I had seen in my own mirror years before. That mixture of frustration, determination, and barely contained hope. "Please, sit down," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "What's your name?" "Emma Rodriguez," she replied, clutching a folder similar to the blue one I had once carried. "I'm a software engineer in the fintech development team." "Tell me what's happening, Emma." She took a deep breath. "For the past 2 years, I've been developing algorithmic trading systems, complex code that processes millions of transactions per second. But every time I complete a project, my supervisor, Tom Bradley, presents it as his own innovation." The story was painfully familiar. "What kind of documentation do you have?" Emma opened her folder. "Everything. Code repositories with my commits, emails with timestamps, even recordings of meetings where Tom admits he doesn't understand the technical details." I smiled. She was more prepared than I had been. "And the clients? Do they know who's really building their systems?" "Some do. Goldman Sachs specifically requested that I be present at their next upgrade meeting. They said the previous implementations were technically superior and they wanted to ensure continuity." "That's excellent leverage," I said. "What's stopping you from coming forward?" Emma's voice dropped. "Tom told me that if I ever went over his head, he'd make sure I was blacklisted from every tech company in the city. He said no one would believe a junior developer over an experienced team lead." I leaned back in my chair, remembering Michael's similar threats. "Emma, let me tell you something I learned the hard way. The most powerful thing you can have isn't their approval. It's their dependency on you." "What do you mean?" "You've been building these systems for 2 years. You understand every line of code, every algorithm, every potential failure point. Tom can present your work, but can he maintain it? Can he troubleshoot it? Can he explain to a client why their system crashed at 3 a.m.? Emma's eyes began to brighten. "He can't. Last month the Morrison account had a critical error, and Tom had to wake me up to fix it. Then he told the client he'd been working on it all night." "Perfect. That's your documentation, right there. Every emergency call, every after-hours fix, every time he needed your expertise to solve a problem he claimed to understand." I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the city that had once seemed so intimidating. Emma, I want you to know that what you're experiencing isn't unique. It's a pattern that repeats across industries, across companies, across generations, but it doesn't have to continue. What should I do? First, continue documenting everything. But now, start documenting his dependencies on you. Every time he asks for your help, every time he can't answer a technical question, every time a client specifically asks for you. Second, I want you to start building direct relationships with your clients. Not to undermine Tom, but to ensure project continuity. When they have technical questions, answer them professionally and thoroughly. Let them see your competence firsthand. And third, I said, returning to my desk, I want you to prepare a presentation. Not about Tom's failings, but about your innovations. Show the value you've created, the problems you've solved, the revenue you've generated. Emma was taking notes rapidly. When should I present it? When you're ready. But Emma, remember this. The goal isn't to destroy Tom. It's to create a system where your contributions are recognized and rewarded appropriately. She looked up from her notes. Did you go through something similar? I smiled. Very similar. And I learned that the most effective revenge isn't personal destruction. It's systemic change. What happened to Michael? Michael is still here. He found his proper role in business development, where his presentation skills are genuinely valuable. He's actually quite good at what he's supposed to do. The problem was never his competence in his area. It was the system that allowed him to claim credit for mine. Emma seemed to process this. So he's successful? In his own right, yes. And that's important, because when you create solutions that work for everyone, you build sustainable change. If I had simply gotten Michael fired, another Michael would have taken his place. But by changing the system, I prevented future Michaels from exploiting future Sarahs. And future Emmas, she added with a small smile. Exactly. Emma closed her folder and stood up. Thank you, Sarah. This gives me hope. Emma, I said as she reached the door, there's one more thing. When you're ready to present your case, I want you to know that you won't be alone. I'll be there to support you, and so will others who have been through similar experiences. Really? Really. You see, over the past 2 years, I've helped 7 other employees in similar situations. We've created an informal network of support. People who understand what you're going through and can provide guidance, encouragement, and sometimes, just a listening ear. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was the only one. You're not. And more importantly, you won't be the last. But each person who stands up, who documents their contributions, who demands recognition, they make it easier for the next person. After Emma left, I sat back in my chair and reflected on how much had changed, not just in my own career, but in the culture of Sterling and Associates. We had implemented mentorship programs, created transparent project attribution systems, and established clear paths for employees to raise concerns about credit and recognition. But perhaps most importantly, we had created a culture where stories like Emma's were increasingly rare, and when they did occur, they were addressed quickly and fairly. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Board meeting in 10 minutes. We're discussing the expansion of the partnership model to our London office. I smiled as I gathered my materials. The work was far from over. But every day we were building something better. As I walked toward the boardroom, I thought about the woman I had been 2 years ago. Sitting in that quarterly meeting, feeling humiliated and powerless. If I could go back and tell her one thing, it would be this. Document everything, trust your value, and remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be invisible. The numbers don't lie, and neither should we. 5 years after that first quarterly meeting, Sterling and Associates had become a case study in progressive workplace culture. We had been featured in Harvard Business Review, and Margaret had been invited to speak at conferences about our innovative approach to talent recognition. But the statistic I was most proud of wasn't about profits or growth. It was simpler. In the past 3 years, we had not had a single case of sustained credit theft reported to HR. Not because it wasn't happening, but because we had created systems and culture that made it impossible to sustain. Emma Rodriguez was now a senior software engineer, leading her own team and working directly with our biggest clients. Tom Bradley had been transferred to project management, where his organizational skills were better utilized. And every month, I received emails from young professionals in other companies, asking for advice on how to document their contributions and claim their rightful recognition. The revolution hadn't been dramatic. It had been methodical, documented, and irrefutable. One spreadsheet at a time, one conversation at a time, one person at a time. Because in the end, the most powerful weapon against injustice isn't anger or revenge. It's simply the truth. Carefully documented and courageously presented. And the truth, as they say, will always set you free.